Welcome to Board Game Binge, the place where we bring you bite-sized, bingeable board game content from across the industry. I'm your host, James Staley, and in this episode, we're chatting with Julian Reinartz from Floating Forge. His debut title, Liars and Looters, a card game about lying and bluffing, recently funded on Kickstarter. Julian, welcome to the binge. How you doing, sir?
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's
it's the first
fantastic
time
having you.
having that live.
Well, you were referred to us by our mutual great friend, Stefan Godot from Godot Games. He is an amazing coach. He's really taken this kind of role in the industry, and especially with the European crowd, and has helped guide a lot of people through this crazy process of board game design and launching on Kickstarter. And it just crushes me that I didn't get to catch up with him at Essen this year. I had to drop out of Essen, but I was looking forward to sharing another beer with him and talking about the industry. So I'm glad he was able to refer you to us, and it's awesome to have you on the podcast today. So first and foremost, I'll say I know we originally were going to have Trish on the podcast. She did get sick early this morning, so she's here in spirit. I'm sure she'll be listening afterwards, and you'll just have to kind of carry the team for the both of you. How's that sound?
Not so good. No, it's all good. I hope I can manage.
Oh, you'll do great. So, Julian, let's start off first with just a little bit about you and Trish. So you do video game design, is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
And then, how long have you been doing that? Is this something you took in school, or?
Well, I mean, it all started when I went off from school. So in Germany, it's like when you're around 19, 20 years old, and my high school degree, all of that stuff. And I really wanted to be an archaeologist. But then I figured out, all that museum stuff and not much exploring. It wasn't my kind of drill. I always thought of it like Indiana Jones and stuff like that. But I really loved working on games at that time already. And so usually at least in Germany, it's not happening that often that your mom refers you to something and you think that's good. But she actually told me that you can study game design. And so I looked around, and there were a few places where you could do that here. And so I applied for one. I got it. I got in. It was private at that time. Nowadays, there's a lot more, and it's also free. But at that time, I applied for it, and that's how I studied. And after the studies, I actually already got someone to work with me on, being self-employed and doing our own little things. And
so you went straight into self-employment with your gaming degree?
I did.
Wow.
I'm not sure if it was a good idea in hindsight, but it was quite the experience, to be honest. And we did had a lot of support from the university at that time. We could still use the rooms and all of that. So we did 2 or 3 projects, and we were also very lucky that we already had some support from the government in regards to being self-employed and doing your own first projects in the video game scene. Unfortunately, not in the board game scene. So I did a lot of practice there. We had a few projects we did. We also worked for the industry, like for Ubisoft, Blue Byte, and stuff like that.
Oh, no kidding.
That was kind of amazing because, I mean, they have one studio nearby. So we already had the chance to meet them there and get in touch. So that was very fortunate, to be honest. Really fortunate.
So I'm always curious. So when working with a company like Ubisoft, so are you coming in and doing a small portion of a game, or do they give you a specific task to say, look, you need to kind of develop this character? How does that work?
The latter definitely. So they come, they have ideas, concepts in certain stages, and then they are usually looking for people that might fill in the gaps, that they can't fill internally right now. And we had some experience in various regions because we're working on our own project, but we also needed some additional funding for it. Yeah. And so we needed to work something on the side. And because we knew a little bit about the project already from back when we were studying, they were like, okay, you already know a little bit about it. You know what? You can take over it. It's not a big thing. And so we worked on Heroes of Might and Magic. It was.
Wow.
That one. Yeah. but it's only minor things, you know, like a little bit of art and assets and stuff like that. And that was pretty amazing to do. Yeah.
Now, have you had a chance to like play the game that you got to work on, and do you see like the character? Like I did that part.
Yes, yes. I mean, I honestly am not that big of a fan for Heroes of Might and Magic, so I never played that much myself. But it's obviously really cool to say like I worked on this, and of course that amounts to other projects now as well, because we continue to work for other things. There's like, I think there was the Industry Empire trailer for Astragon on the media. I'm not even sure if that's familiar. It was something we worked on, and then I moved from my own self-employment, because at the end of the day, you know, you have to cover for all the stuff yourself. You have to make the plans correct, and we were so young. So it didn't work out like that. We split up because we all had our different opinions of how we want to continue that. And so I personally moved into another very small indie company called Head Up Games. And we did like the Bridge Constructor series. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that one.
I'm not.
We published here in Europe. We published Terraria and Binding of Isaac, things like that. But that's all Europe-wide.
Yeah.
Stuff.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
And then, so did you ever get into like apps and things like that, or is it more kind of larger kind of console type games?
It was always a console and PC. I would not want to touch apps, to be honest. We already did a little bit of apps app stuff. Because there was one mobile game that we at Head Up at least were making.
Yeah.
So I had a little bit insight into it, and I hated it. It's a very, very demanding environment. You have to make sure that at least at that time, you know, mobile phones weren't as good as they are now.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of things you had to make do and remove from the game to make it even work. That was
oh, really?
very interesting.
Yeah, I always wondered, like with game, like video game design, if like those were separate camps, right? Console versus apps, and if there's ever any crossover between those two, or they're almost like in other industries where you have specialties, right? Where someone is like in marketing advertising is very different than say doing marketing collateral in magazine prints. Those are completely different. They're still fall under marketing, right? But they're very, very different disciplines where there's not really necessarily a lot of crossover. I assume video games might be similar then, is it?
It is. Especially if you look at the mobile market and the video games market. Yeah. Yes, there's some crossovers, of course, and depending on what kind of game you make, you know, it's suitable for the mobile market as well. We had one or two games, like the Bridge Constructor game I just mentioned, is something that works really well on mobile and on PC. But that is like one of the really few ones that we made that worked. Everything else was like not really suitable for mobile as well. And it also, you have to find someone who can take care of that, because most of the times there's quite a few things you have to be aware of when doing it.
Yeah.
And that's even more so than doing it from PC to console. Yeah.
And then how did you and Trish meet? Because she's like a musician, right? Like.
Yeah, well, I mean, that was easy because she's my girlfriend.
Oh, okay, there you go.
And so we already met at high school, actually. So we came together at that time, and as you mentioned, she's a musician. She actually studied architecture and did some gigs there, but her heart was always at music. And she already had a band when she studied. She still has one now, and she's doing some more local things. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the carnival here in Germany. All these festivities we have around February and March, and they have a band that's very specialized into that, and that's pretty cool. But she's also doing music for games as well, for video games.
So there's some tie into the industry then, I guess, eh?
Exactly. That's probably where that all connected. And of course, she loves video gaming too, and also board games. And I think that's where it somehow got together when I was doing idea drafting for games, for board games actually, because I always love to play my board games as well. Meet up with friends, because that's a little bit different, than video games,
Yeah.
where you all watch the screen and you don't communicate as much. Okay, it depends on the game a little bit, but
Sure.
most of the times it's different. So yeah, and she was really into it. And then when I actually had like already set my first steps into the board game development, she was eager to support that and help out, and she was really into it, and yeah, helped a lot with that.
Oh, that's amazing. And then your decision to kind of jump over to the board game, was it more of a kind of drawing from your prior passion in the board game industry? Was it seeing kind of the growth in kind of hobby gaming, or was it more moving towards something more tactile as kind of an escape from the digital side?
Yeah, I think this is where actually Ubisoft comes in again.
Yeah.
Because a friend of mine I met through Ubisoft and working for Ubisoft, who worked there at that time. He was also a huge board game geek, and he started a board game at the years ago. Paul Tuderas, I'm not sure if you're familiar with him.
No.
And he did a board game called Castle von Logan.
Okay.
And since I love doing design stuff, he asked me for some insights and some help. And that is, I think, 2017 or something, was it?
Okay.
2018, when we started working together on this. And he always had the vision to make it like a real game. And I really loved that, and working on board games. And that is how I came into it, really. It's like I saw what you can do with it, how you can also make these connections from your video games and all that stuff you learned. I mean, we do have, in the first semester of our studies, we did all do board games too. It's not
really,
there was never a connection anyways. Yeah, it's
interesting.
We did a Bomberman from the Bomberman, basically for board game, where you had all few rounds you had to remove the outer area of the board you were playing on, like in Sudden Death and Bomberman, and you had 2 actions, I think, per character, and you were moving and certain things. That was something that we had to do as for the end of the first semester. So that was the first connection already. But as I mentioned, and until 2017,
yeah,
I only played. I never worked on these things again. But yeah.
And then Floating Forge as a company, where did that name come from?
Oh my God, I love alliterations,
Got it.
And I think it has a very nice ring to it. And when we thought about what kind of games we wanted to do, we thought it should be something not as heavyweight as the Euro games, from Europe, right? Yep. And not as long lasting. It should still have some kind of complexity, but at the same time, we wanted people to enjoy it, no matter how long they've already been into the board game, and into board games and have been playing. And so we kind of had this more lightweightish thing. So that was probably where Floating came from.
Yeah, Floating Forge, yeah.
That. And the Forge, we developed it. So Forge is something where you work hard on these things, and then you create something with the resources you have. And that was something that really, really ticked for us.
So yeah. Light creations. I love it.
Yeah.
And so Liars and Looters is a perfect fit into that, obviously, because it's more of a party style kind of game. Where did the concept for that come from, and how long had you been working on that?
Yeah, so I think when Corona started, around 2020 something.
Okay.
We had I already had an idea for a game that was in this really, really cool fantasy world filled with creatures that are humanoid, but also anthropomorphic.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wanted to tell a story about that, where they all are basically struggling to survive, but at the same time they have their own settlements and camps where they trade with each other. And these kind of things I wanted to merge. And that was the game that is not announced yet. But that is basically when we thought, okay, this is a really cool game, but the mechanics I already envisioned for this game, and I already conceptualized, and we tried out and prototyped, and we felt were really cool, were also big. And we felt like if we wanted to really go with a game and bring it out to the world and show the people what we can do, and then we do this, we want to promise everyone that we can really deliver. And so with this huge game, we thought, okay, this is too much. We want something smaller, something convenient that also fits into that world that is already there, and also depicts something from it, but is smaller in size, so that people can also enjoy and already have a little bit of an insight into how that world of Monsters and Merchants, it's the game that's coming up, but the world of Liars and Looters basically is playing in. And that's how it came up. And so we thought, okay, we really love card games, right? We love games like Coop and Love Letter. It's the really cool introduction games. They make fun, and they're not as complex, but we can really enjoy it playing together with friends when you start the evening or when you end it. And so we thought about something like that. And we wanted, as we mentioned before, there has to be something easy to understand. And so we wanted to stick with cards, like the 64 cards you have, and basically everyone plays this tribe. I'm not sure if I should already go into detail.
Yeah, sure. Let's talk about it. Yeah, explain the game. Yeah, that's why we're here.
Yeah, so we came up with Liars and Looters, and Liars and Looters basically is 3 to 6 players, and everyone plays a tribe, or each player plays a tribe, and that tribe is looking for resources to bring their first adventurer into the open, right, out and have them explore. But to get these resources, you have to form a deck at the start of the game, and everyone draws 2 cards from that deck, and this is basically your start hand, and these are all resources. So what happens is, every time it's your turn, you draw 1 card from that deck, and you get another resource to your hand. However, at some point, or maybe even already at that point, you got resources your faction doesn't need. And so what you do is, after you draw a card, you have to trade with the others. And what you do is, you face down put 1 of your cards from your hand to offer it to the rest of the group. And then, one by one, everyone on the table has to offer you another card, also face down. The thing is, you might not like the card you have, and you might know that most of the others also don't want that card as well. So what you can do, because it's face down, and that's the good gimmick of the game, is you can lie about what you offer. And the problem is, everyone else can do the same. So it's a little bit about who you can trust when they offer, and who you want to actually trade with, and like what offer is actually the best for you as well. And so bit by bit, you try to figure out what the others have been drawing, and what you are actually in need of. And once you got the 6 resources your faction is looking for on your hand, at the end of this trade, you win. Of course, there's a little bit of events mixed in between that you pick up, and when you draw them, people might not be allowed to lie in 1 turn. So they have to tell the truth, or someone has to pick cards from another one, stuff like that. So that messes up the game a little bit.
Would the other players know that you're not allowed to lie? Like, is it like a
yes?
Like, okay, so it'll come up and say, okay, no one's allowed to lie this round.
Yeah, exactly. So you always, if there's an event card, that's the only time when you actually open the card and tell everyone what it is and what is happening.
That's interesting, because I gotta imagine in some games, if you think of like Sheriff, right, you're constantly lying about the goods you're trying to smuggle past the sheriff and things like that. You get this kind of metagaming effect that in subsequent plays, people are like, oh, I know that person constantly lies, so I'm not going to believe anything they say, right? Whereas in this case, you're kind of forcing certain sections or segments to actually to be truthful, right? So you know that, okay, I have at least an opportunity. If this person's just a pathological liar, I at least have an opportunity where I'm going to be able to trade something with them that I know is legit, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Oh, that's hilarious. How long is this game played for?
Come again?
Like, how long is the playtime? Like an average playtime of a game?
The playtime. Yeah, sorry. That's usually around 15 minutes. So 10 to 15 minutes usually. That's how long you take.
So it's a good party game, kind of good like filler or gateway type game for people when they're starting their game nights.
Yeah, exactly. There's also we also have an expansion that is coming with the base game right now that you could pledge, for example, and that expansion also adds actually the liar and the looter card, and that's basically giving players a role that do some extra stuff. Then there's another thing in the expansion which basically makes you not just look for 6 resources as a tribe, but you first start off like with 4 resources you're looking for, and then once you got the 4 resources, you switch to 6, which makes it much more interesting because people now have to be more honest with each other, because maybe they want to get to the 4 faster and then be honest and then try to get the other 6 later on. And yeah, so there's a lot of things of interactions with the expansions as well. But the base game, 10 to 15 minutes, and it's already a lot of fun. At least from what we also saw from all the players.
Oh, it looks like a blast, absolutely. And then I noticed that one of your pledge levels was like a lifetime, like kind of like the thing where if they pledge and they get every game for the rest of that you publish from now till the end of time.
Yeah.
How did that decision come about, and what was like? What for other people looking to potentially get into game publishing and trying to figure out how to structure their pages and the offers to make? What leads to a decision like that, which can be kind of like costly, right? Like you always hear these stories of these people that did these lifetime airline tickets where they end up getting millions of dollars. I mean, this is not millions, but like they end up getting significantly more value out of what that initial payment was, and to the point where the airlines had to finally cut it off because they're losing substantial amounts of money. To do the kind of the analogy here, what is the decision that leads you kind of to something like that?
Yeah. So I think first of all, that's Stefan's fault.
Yeah.
No, but he made the suggestion. Actually, we thought a lot about it because of the things you just mentioned. Of course, you always have to think. So first and foremost, for us, it was clear that if we're gonna do and get this game out and fund it, we're gonna do more. We already had, several titles planned. I already mentioned one, and so for us, it was like, if we do something like that, we already need to know that we can promise more, because otherwise it would just feel like a scam or something, right?
Yeah.
So that was one of the most important bits for us. The other thing is we need to limit it to a certain degree, because of course we want people to support us. And if someone really feels like, you know what, this is your first game, and I really think you're doing a great job with all the stuff I've already seen, and I believe that this can be something valuable, and I might also think that this can be something valuable for me in the future, I support you now with that much money, right? Because it is a lot.
Yeah.
At least in my opinion. And so for me, that was something where we thought, okay, let's make it as small as possible, but it gets us a little bit of a boost as well. And if we in the future make a certain amount of copies, which we really feel that we will do, and we also are quite aware that there's always a risk involved, but for us it was worth that risk and take, to say, okay, look, that's like 10 copies we have to do in addition every time to deliver to those people, but they also supported us from the start, right?
Yeah.
And that felt really good to see that there's already like 7 people pledged for it already, right?
Yeah.
And so the late pledges coming, we'll see, but already 7 people was overwhelming for us. We did not expect it. So that's really cool. And yeah.
Now, do they get shipping for free too, or do they pay the shipping on top of that?
No, actually they get shipping free. At least that's how we communicated that, as far as I know. I don't want to overpromise anything yet, but I think it was included. Yes.
It's a cool kind of VIP type of pledge level, right? Where I know that there's a lot of debate in the industry right now about like how to handle VIPs and what's fair and what's not fair. But a thing like that, where I'm a believer. VIP programs, I have no issue with them, because I think that people that are willing to come in early to help you realize your vision, they should be rewarded for that. And I don't have a problem with that. And I know, like, I've seen some of the boards where people are like, it's not fair, you're offering a VIP, I didn't know about that. And I'm talking about some of these early offers and things like this, but at the end of the day, the entire purpose of Kickstarter is to kickstart, this journey you're going on as a publisher. And, most of us don't have the resources that Mattel and Hasbro and these different guys have to put games out there, and are heavily relying on the investment of others. So you know, if there's people that want to be on the early, take the risk, because it's always a risk when you're backing a Kickstarter project, you know, get on the front end of that and help, you know, get somebody to kind of get their sea legs, so to speak. I'm
Yeah,
totally
completely.
cool with that. I think that's great. And this is one other example of how to maybe pursue that people consider and look at. What were some of the piece of advice, would you say, like what's the one piece of advice that Stefan gave you going into this campaign that kind of stuck in your head, something you really wanted to focus on?
Ooh, it's hard. I think there were like quite a few things that really helped flesh this out, like marketing wise, what we
Yeah,
should do, like be more active about it, talk more about the game as soon as possible, and show that stuff. I know that that having someone that can guide you through that and just help you push and do this is so important and so valuable. I think that was something that really helped us. And I think I was really happy to see that he was really happy with what we already did because
yeah,
uh, because of that. So, but I think also that he recommend using certain tools like going to GameFound now with the project and sticking with Kickstarter for the first one because it was such a small game
yeah,
and we can reach a bigger audience with it on Kickstarter now than we could on GameFound yet.
of
So
course.
that was like kind of a thing that he really helped us with tackle. Yeah,
It's good to have someone that you can act as a sounding board in the industry, right? And there's a lot of people out there that are willing to play that role. The information's there if you're willing to go and look for it, right?
yeah,
And simple things like, you know, sharing your game. I am still shocked when I come across a comment on like this somebody puts on a Facebook page or a question in a group where they're like, "Oh, I've got this idea. I'm nervous about sharing it. Do I need to get a patent first and all this kind of
mm,
like." And it's like, what? Like, no, like, you know, if you kind of consume the information that's out there, you'll realize that, A, nobody's trying to steal your game. There's so many games coming out every week. Everyone is focused on their own thing. There's no one has time to go and look at your game and say, how can I copy this guy's game? They're focused on their own thing.
oh yeah, the time thing is such a good example. Yeah,
Oh,
no one
yeah.
has time to do that.
Yeah, it's crazy. And in terms of like copies, the average amount of copies you're going to produce is 1,500, right? Like that's the average kind of run size. If you have an incredibly popular game, maybe you're going to do 5, 10,000 copies, but most people are doing 1,500 copies or less, and maybe only one print run, right? So it's it's a passion. This hobby is basically passion projects that you're doing. Most people have day jobs, right, and they're doing this kind of as a side gig, and so it's easy to get caught up in kind of these, you know, how do I kind of cross my T's and dot my I's by getting
Yeah,
trademarks and all this kind of stuff when most of the time none of that really matters, right?
no, I get you.
It's
Yes.
more about how many people can I get to play this as fast as possible. How can I make sure that everything is flushed out in terms of making my page look good, make sure there's a video, make sure that there's GIFs on it so there's some movement on the page, and go through kind of the standard points of setting up what is this game about and then explaining how the game works and really
Yeah,
trying to get your message target to the audience, and then put your time and effort into advertising to get your email list up so that you can e-blast people, and then that as an audience you can carry over from campaign to campaign. It
yeah,
really is
exactly.
as kind of simple and as structured as that, right?
Yeah,
But it's easy kind of get distracted. So sometimes, and I've talked to a lot of people in this industry where, you know, I'll provide advice based on my experiences, right? And by no means do I position myself as an expert, but having gone through this a couple times, you can share kind of your experiences, what worked and what didn't with other people. Biggest one being Amazon that I love to talk to people about, and you and I'll talk off air about that, of
yeah,
how to protect yourself there, because there's a lot of ways that you can, there's somewhere that people can hijack, your brand and your listings and so forth if you don't set yourself up properly.
yeah.
But
I
it's
saw
just
that.
talking to people in the industry, right? And getting advice wherever you can. And those who seek that information will be successful. And those that think they have all the answers, it's going to be a struggle, right?
Yeah, no, I'm totally with you. I think being open-minded and
Yeah.
sharing is really a good thing, and you should do it. So if you feel like you have something, then share it,
Yeah.
because I think at the end of the day, there's thousands of idea guys, but making it and producing it and bringing it out to the world, that's just the little few people that do that.
So what for you guys? So now you did kind of like this reverse kind of launch. So you had one game you're working on. You launched this one because it's a simpler game. You want to get this out first, kind of get your seed, like, so to speak. So what's the next game you're coming with? Like, what's that plan then?
So as I mentioned, there's this big game with more complexity that we've been working on that is called Monsters and Merchants. But this would probably not be the next one, because there's another game that we have been working on that also takes place in that whole setting that we set up for Monsters and Merchants, with that cool little creatures like that one here over there.
Yeah.
And obviously the ones hearing that can't see it. But it's a cool little fox creature with a mask, and that's kind of the setting we have for the other tribes as well, all these creatures with masks. And the next game is also a little bit about exploration and basically discovering a little bit more complex, because you have a board, you also have cards and meeples or miniatures. We're still tackling that point, but yeah, and it might already be something we can show next year. Yeah.
Oh wow, I think it's so cool that you've created kind of this interconnected universe, really, right? So you've got this story universe, and then you got these different games that kind of, thematically are all tied through this universe, but they're all kind of standalone games, I guess, is the way this is set up, right?
Exactly.
Oh, yeah. That's amazing. Well, for those who want to check out this campaign, I know the campaign's already done, but you and I are talking off here just before we went live that you are there'll be like a late pledge option for people.
Exactly.
That's going to come out the next day or two. I'll put a link in the show notes to your actual Kickstarter page, because there will be a button there that'll show up again next probably 48 hours. They'll take people to your Game Found page, which will be your pledge manager. They can late pledge there. It's definitely worth checking out. It looks like a lot of fun, and I love the artwork and the graphics and so forth. So for those who want to check it out, I will put a link in the show notes. Julian, I want to wish you and Trish all the best on this campaign. I can't wait to see the next iteration comes out next year, and hopefully I can make it to Essen and we can go for a beer, my friend.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me.
No worries, buddy. You take care. Cheers.
Goodbye.
This has been an episode of the Board Game Binge podcast, hosted by James Staley, produced by James Staley and Mike Bruner, with original music by Nick Smith. If you would like to watch these interviews live, simply subscribe to our YouTube channel, Board Game Binge, and you'll get access to live interviews, giveaways, and interesting board game content from across the industry. I can't wait for you to join us. See you next time.